So everyone at one point or another has created art before in their life, whether it was a sketch on a notebook or graffiti on an abandoned building. Art has always been in our lives in one form or another. That is why today I would like to enlighten you on 3 of the ways art has influenced our lives, and how politicians can use it as a tool, how art is used as a tool for politicians and a cure for some patients. First, it is important to know what art is. Art is, in simple terms, a form of expression created by humans. Which brings me to my first point on how art is used as a coping mechanism, or known as art therapy. Art therapy is a form of therapy that encourages self-expression through forms of painting, sculpture, or drawings. Art therapy tends to help soldiers that suffer with PTSD. A quote from Senator Bob Grant on art therapy says, "Art therapists provide effective treatment and help maintenance intervention for veterans gradually returning from the war in Iraq." Art therapy has the potential to assist them as a form of rehabilitation. One example of art therapy working is with PTSD is Sergeant Perry Hoffman, a flight medic in Iraq, who didn't want anything to do with art therapy because he assumed it was for girls and panties. But after he gave it a try, he started to open up more and express himself better. Art therapy doesn't only help with PTSD, but depression as well. There are many ways to treat depression, and one that has been around for 50 years is art therapy. Like I said before, it is used so that people who aren't able to express them with words can in a form of painting or drawing. Depression is quite common in cancer patients. Actually, about 25% of cancer patients are diagnosed with depression. And many, after trying art therapy, have felt better and lighter after the sessions. Now, art doesn't only help people who are sick, but it also helps to make people aware of politics and their surroundings. Or other terms that our professor used, a way for us to say woke. Art is commonly used in politics to help connect with the audience they are targeting. A form of this would be propaganda. A few decades ago, when the country needed soldiers, they used art as a form of propaganda to persuade citizens into the military. This is one of the pictures. It visually makes war pleasing. It basically bandwagons, oh, everyone's doing it, come along, come join. And the other picture is Uncle Sam pointing at you saying, "I want you for U.S. Army." It doesn't really show what the war is. Propaganda not only inhibits our sense of reality, it frequently causes us to act against our interests. It does this by affecting the primitive parts of the brain that are unaffected by logic or consciousness, but responds to images and symbols. Now, in contrast to propaganda, there is protest. Art has been a part of protest for as long as possible. Art and artistic expression serve many functions in political protests. Some of them aim at producing knowledge and solidarity within the group of protesters, and others as a means of communicating to those outside what the protest is about. An example of someone using art as a form of protest is Banksy. Banksy is a graffiti artist in London that causes an uproar with his artworks. He actually uses art as a political weapon. And some examples of this artwork this is one of them. It's basically saying how the sign where graffiti is a crime, he's basically vandalizing it and showing that it's really not. And this other artwork where is a picture of a homeless man holding a sign that says, "Keep your coins, I want change." Now, despite art being used as a way to depict someone's beliefs and ideas, it is also used as a way to bring people closer together. Art has never just been for one group of people, it is meant for everyone of different cultures and race. Art has an uncanny ability to overcome cultural and ethnic differences. Art is like a universal language that brings people together, where every idea and belief is welcome to express in any form. An example of art bringing communities together is Judith Baca's creation of the Great Wall of Los Angeles. It began in 1974 and completed over 5 summers. The Great Wall employed over 400 youth and their families from diverse social and economic backgrounds, working with artists, oral historians, scholars, and hundreds of community members. So the next time you draw a sketch on your notebook or vandalize an abandoned building, just think about how art has influenced your life. Thank you.
All right, Micah, what did you think?
Well, I thought it was a good speech. I thought all the information about art therapy was really interesting. About how it helps with depression and all that. And your transitions were good, so it's easy to follow. And you cited all your sources and gave some examples. And your visuals were good too, how you explained your visuals. So that was incorporated well, and your outro was also good.
All right. I like the common experience that you're using at the beginning of the speech to kind of get our attention, and I know that the subject is clearly identified, but I think your purpose ends up being vaguer than it should be, although you did have a pretty good preview of what the supporting structure was going to be. The idea of art therapy treating PTSD on that first point is solid, and in fact you've got some good information there that you actually cite the source for on each of those things. You've got an example that you present. I don't know exactly where the example came from, but it seems very realistic. It would be interesting if we had the words from the individual himself who talked about how it affected him and improved him. I forget what his name is. He's one of the military guys who was doing that. And I'm sure that in the article that you consulted or the source that you got, there was some opinion that was shared by the soldier who probably talked about how it, like you said, he might have had a negative impression of it before he began, but afterwards, I'm able to do X, Y, and Z. I don't have this particular problem, or I can at least talk about it more, or something like that, or have some information from the therapist who's talked about it. You found the information someplace, so obviously people are talking about it a little bit. This is not something that's confidential, because otherwise you wouldn't have discovered it. The idea that there is also a need for this in other places where people might have illnesses or depression, I like that idea as well. You had one statistic that said 25% of people who are suffering from cancer have depression. And so what I wanted to know about is, so their therapy means that they just start doodling someplace, or is there a program that they go to? Is there something that in hospitals or medical communities they suggest this? Tell me a little bit about those programs and what it entails. Do people come together to do this? Do they do this on their own? Is there a class? Is it, the idea that drawing or painting or doing something artistic might help address your depression. I don't think that that's a hard leap to make, but you're kind of putting it into the context that this is something that is useful for medical purposes. I'm going, well, okay. I've had people tell me watching comedies is useful for medical purposes to deal with also. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that I believe is a great idea, and I think you need a little bit more information on that particular point. So your first point was the one that had, I think, good content in it, maybe a little bit more specific source citation on those points. On the propaganda, here's the thing that I thought was missing. You had no visuals in that first section at all that talked about that issue. And that would have been one of those places where you might have been able to find a place online where there's a class at the VA where soldiers who have PTSD are using art either in the form of sculpture or painting or drawing or something else to help them deal with that. Or maybe there's a class where people are doing it, something like that. You could have a picture of that sort of a scenario. Or if there was some statistical information about it, that they have fewer incidents. I don't know if they, what the information says, but if there was some information that said that they had fewer traumatic moments or recall or fewer suicides or something like that, there might be some data that you could illustrate that way. It just felt like there's a void in that whole first section. You're talking about art, you get halfway through your speech and we've got no visual material whatsoever, and I'm thinking, that just seems like it's wrong, because the subject is art. Then when you get to the second section where you're talking about propaganda, that's okay. You do make some references. It seems like it's kind of a personal evaluation of what's going on, although there was a sociological perspective that's suggested at one point. And for instance, you said there's an idea that there are primary parts of the brain that respond to this sort of thing. And I'm going, says who? I know that it's not you who's figured this out, and you're telling us this, and I want to know what that's based on. So you need to kind of give us some information on that sort of thing. The pictures are okay, but they do seem like historically, you're talking about something that happened 100 years ago. How about some more contemporary examples, especially of political propaganda? The famous Obama Hope poster is a good example of something like that. Or maybe there would be something from the Iraq War that you could make a reference to. There's plenty of political stuff that goes on that uses visual things like that. Banksy's not a bad illustration for that particular idea also, that there's some kind of political protest that goes on in regard to those issues. That feels a little bit like it's a whole separate point, and it's like, I'm not sure, one person's propaganda is another person's protest. Maybe it's two parts of the same topic that you're dealing with there. And Banksy, of course, it's a little abstract, the kinds of things that are being protested. I don't want your coins, I want change. I'm going, well, that saves me from having to reach in my pocket anytime I see a poor person, but it doesn't tell me what kind of change I should be making, that kind of thing. And the graffiti one is a little, all right, that's ironic. I get that. I had an example last year that is funny. We've got one of those fences around a culvert, like a wash, a flood control channel. And there's a sign on it that says post no bills, and somebody went around and they put pictures of Bill Gates, Bill Cosby, Bill Clinton, that sort of thing all the way around it. And I thought, oh, that's kind of funny, there's a little bit of irony, and that's what the Banksy thing is doing. I don't know how important it makes the change, but I think the idea that there are street artists who are doing this for some political or social reason is important. Banksy, though, I think is a good example of that, but it's a little, kind of abstract in nature. All right, and I like the conclusion of the speech pretty well. Also, I'm sorry, I'm running on a little bit, but we have time. So, since see, this is you point to all of your classmates who weren't here, ready to go, and say, when you're not here, he keeps talking about my speech. Damn it! So you guys got to get here. So he has to be forced to shut up a little bit sooner. Your presentation we're not heavily emphasizing presentation right now, but you really need to talk more to us. You do a lot of reading, and you know, there's no energy in your voice. It's like you're just reading it out loud instead of talking to us. And this is a subject that seems to invite some passion, some enthusiasm, a little bit of, you know, humor here and there, a little bit of drama in a couple of spots, and you're just kind of going through, I think, the motions a little bit, and I think you need to work on that. All right, thank you.